Let this define you. Life's challenges can derail you from your destiny and purpose. We're here to remind you that getting knocked down, no matter how hard, can be the starting point of the best days of your life. Do you believe that your failures can define you in the best way possible? Listen in on Patrick McMullan's conversation with inspiring people who have proven it can. On this week's episode, we have the pleasure of talking to Brian Moran, co-author of the New York Times Bestseller, The 12-Week Year. Over the last several years, Brian and his business partner, Michael Lennington, have aligned themselves with many of the largest organizations in the world to bring impact. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Patrick and Brian.
Been a long time since Chicago, hasn't it?
Yeah, a few years.
Yeah, what a fun time that was in our journey to meet, eh?
Yeah, that was.
And here now you're in Arizona, and it's all your fault that we're having all this snow. You brought it from Michigan.
Yeah. No, I was here last year. We didn't have this stuff, so.
But you're solving.
Can't believe me, man.
I mean, you're solving all the water crisis here. I mean,
that's the good news, right? I mean,
they
ever seen a green desert? I mean, it's crazy how green it is.
Yeah, you posted that picture the other day, and
yeah,
I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, drive around anywhere, just take it all in. It's the beauty of living here.
Hopefully, it's warming up though.
Well, because I really don't want to. I really don't want to go into the cold. I mean, let's put it this way. There's a reason we live in Arizona.
That's right. That's why I moved here, to get away from all that.
Nice 360 days a year. So, well, Brian, the podcast is called Let This Define You. And it's really a journey. And you've been on a journey for how long? How long have you where did you come up with it? Tell the story, the pivotal hardship in your life that kind of redefined you as a person and who you've become today.
You know, that's interesting, Patrick, because I've had a number of pivotal hardships. I don't dwell on them, though. Both Judy and I, my wife, are cancer survivors. I would say those were pivotal hardships in how we look at life and how we approach life. And, I'd say, our faith is even stronger than it was before that. But I think that's the impact that's had is just us walking in gratitude every day. The other one, though, that was really big was that big recession in 2009, 2010.
Yeah, like life-changing for many people.
It was for us because we lost everything. We literally lost everything. And there was a time my wife and I were in bed. We had a 2-story house, colonial. We're in bed, and all of a sudden, Judy hears some ruckus, and she goes to the window. And she looks out, and she's like, "They're here." And I'm like, "Yeah, this is the middle of the night, right?"
Sure.
Like, what do you mean they're here? She says, "The monkeys." And for us, what that meant was, when we were kids, we talked about the scariest movie we saw as a kid was The Wizard of Oz. And what made it scary was not only the witch, but it was those flying monkeys. And so she gets up in the middle of the night and she goes, "They're here. The monkeys are here. They're taking your car." So my car was being repossessed. We lost our home. We lost our savings. We had zero money at the end of this thing. And I owed the IRS $120,000.
That's a heck of a start when you think about what we're talking about here today. I mean, but you never let that down. And I think what drew me to you, Brian, is when we met in Chicago, and it really actually our journey together started a few years prior because I felt I needed something else to go to another level in leading our businesses. And all of a sudden I found the 12-week year. But what drew me to you is when I started to follow you and to hear that you had been through a journey similar to mine, but you didn't let that define you. You picked your boots up, you picked yourself up off the ground. And I guess, one of the things I always look at is when I get up every morning, just what's going to get me going? What's going to be my victory today? How did you start? How did you bring it all the way back?
It was a tough time, and it was really tough on our marriage as well. We had 2 young girls, and it was one of those things that my wife was kind of like, "Well, maybe you need to go get a real job," because I was self-employed doing my own thing, and I'm like, "Well, I could do that, but it's going to limit our income. It's going to limit our potential, and right now there's a lot of people looking for those jobs. So that's a full-time job to find a job, and it could be 12 to 18 months to get it."
Sure.
So I looked and I said, "Okay, what's the best scenario for us long term?" And that was really to continue to bet on myself and what we were doing. But we had to pivot. We had to redefine our business. We were working with large clients. Fortune 1000 clients. They were big contracts. We were a small group, so we didn't have many of them. And what happened in that recession is we either finished it and they didn't do anything more, or they stopped the project because of financial restraints they had. And so no one was buying. The selling cycle's 18 months long in those things. And we said, you know what, we've got to pivot. We can't operate this way going forward. It's just too risky for us. We've got, too many eggs in one basket, and there are only a couple of eggs to begin with. So we redefined how we were doing our business, how we went after our business. And honestly, we used the 12-week year to do it.
Right now, when you think about what the economy, and everybody's predicting recession and what the heck's going to happen, but you're a success story that I think many people, it's why you're here. What drew me to you again, why we're sitting here today, is because the fact is you redefined yourself, you reinvented yourself in how you were doing business, but you stuck to your core principles, which I still think too many people look for a new trick every dang day just to try to get a solution. You stuck to who you were, but you pivoted. And out of a recession, look what happened.
Yeah. So what happened for us is, we pivoted the way we were going to market, who we were focused on, but like you said, stuck the same principles. And, within a year, my personal income was higher than it had ever been. So it was amazing. And we're continuing to have it to pivot because the marketplace is always changing, but not so radically as during that time.
Let's hope not, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what advice would you give someone today, just even today, based upon the last 12 years since that whole period, 13 years, just one thing that you would say, hey, this is what you should do to define yourself today in this uncertain time that everybody wants to talk about?
Yeah, I think you have to keep looking forward. And in those difficult moments, it's hard to dream, but you've got to dream. You've got to have a dream that compels you, that is worth fighting for. And for me, that was what I wanted to create for my family in terms of a lifestyle and the type of family we wanted to be and the things we wanted to do and the things we wanted to accomplish. So never letting go of that was probably the toughest part of that, because everything around you is telling you that's never going to happen.
Sure.
Right. You owe the IRS 120 grand and you got bub kiss. How are you going to do that?
Right.
Right. And so hanging on to that dream, and just act on it consistently. Right. It's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change next week. But if you keep after it enough, it's going to change.
So you talked about the monkey night. That maybe you heard it defined as that. When you think about just the obstacles and the different thing, was that the night that changed everything, that you said, hey, I'm going to change my life?
It was all part of that, right? I mean, that was a horrible moment for us. I mean, we kind of joke about it now, the flying monkeys, but that was a horrible moment for us. And those months that ensued with that, because we worked hard to sell the house for the bank,
right?
And they didn't take the sale because they got more money through TARP if they didn't take the sale, and they ended up selling the house for less. And we didn't walk away. We made a deal to pay that back because we felt like we owed it.
Sure.
So but that night was the beginning of kind of a nightmare for us that went on for, more than 12 months.
And look where you are today, though. I mean, as you describe, in that 12 months, you went from just rock bottom to where you said you'd never booked more business. Why do you think you booked more business? Was it just the fact that you applied the 12-week year principles and put that into action and then took it out? Or is there something else that maybe someone wouldn't see in the book that just defined who you are?
It's a big piece of look, any plan you put together is flawed. There's no perfect plan. So you've got to walk it out and make adjustments along the way. And that's what we did. And so with the 12-week year, what we did is we failed faster. That makes sense.
It's a beautiful term.
Right. So in order to figure out what works, if you haven't been there before, and I hadn't been there before, and I hope I'm never there again.
Right.
And I hope your listeners are never there. But that was, we were in a situation where we're never in before. So it wasn't like, let's be paralyzed by that. We need more action, right? We need to get out there and try a bunch of stuff. Much of it's not going to work, but let's find the stuff that does. And that's how we were able to do that.
So just as we start to, rebuild, and you're in that process, and I mean, our journeys are similar. And again, it's why when I read your book and started deploying it, it connected with me, and it it's just something I could relate to. And there were so many people that could relate to it. I mean, let's face it, that economy crash was brutal for everybody.
Yeah.
Is there any stories or something that you go back to when you were pivoting that fueled to say, hey, this person or this event, this client just took me and said, listen, I'm on the right path? And when it happened, how did you act? What did it feel like?
Yeah, it wasn't, unfortunately for us, it wasn't like that. It was more, the validation came as the things we were doing started to produce some fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And the harvesting is always different from the planting. So
Sure.
It wasn't immediate. So that's where you got to keep the faith. That's why you got to have the dream. That's why you've got to keep moving forward, because there is that gestation period. And so as we started to see some of the fruit bear and some of the clients say, hey, this is really good, this is working, that was validation that we're on the right track. Let's continue to do this. And a big pivot for us was moving away from those large companies to really focusing on individuals, which was a challenge for us because I knew how to sell.
Sure.
So I could talk to the president of Allstate and he bought for everybody.
Sure.
When you're selling to an individual, you got to learn to market. And so we had a big curve on learning to market. We're still learning, right? There's still more about that we're learning every day.
It's amazing how, it's part of what Break Time U is all about, is giving people tools that they can learn every day in a format that's just short, simple, concise, that allows people to take something that you teach and bring it to their life every day and immediately. So it's, again, why why we're all sitting here today, what excites me about it and so forth. So, yeah, but I want to go back to that time and just what did success look like? When you were going through that battle of trying to reemerge and come back, what did you define success as then? What do you define success as now?
In those times it was more narrowly focused, because we had to figure out how to financially make the business work. So
Sure.
that was the measure of success. Can we pivot this business to where it's a financial success, where there's enough revenue, there's enough margin, right? And we're delivering what clients want and need, and it's making a difference, because our mission is to change lives.
Right.
So that's the longer guiding vision behind the whole thing. But figuring out, what products, what programs actually do that and are profitable and people want, that was the trick.
Sure. How do you today, if you would look at today, what's different today in how you're approaching things versus back then?
Well, it's more about what we just described, right? We're always talking to the clients about, okay, what do they need? What's next? How do we support them? Is the stuff we're doing making a difference? If not, how do we tweak that? So even the things we've had, I'd say we've made improvements to, right? That's part of the process. It's that mindset of, look, we're always trying to get a little better. And that's why I love this whole concept.
Right. So let me kind of change paths a little bit and go and talk about when you've seen clients that you started working with, and I've looked at my highs and lows of my own career, and I say, hey, this is when I've been at my best, and this is maybe when I was at my worst, and coming back to redefining what I do, just for someone like yourself, when you see, as you said, just what does success look like to you? What does success not look like to you that you see the average person struggle with so much?
I think there's a couple things right now in society in that you get caught up in. One is that you let society decide what success should look like for you.
Sure.
And so the work we do at the 12-week year starts with helping people decide what they want their life to look like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Sure.
And by the way, what great looks like.
Yeah.
Not good. God willing, you're going to be here. Let's make it great. And not worry about what society says. Really capturing what's in your heart. And that's a key. And the other thing is, I think we're led to believe that success is kind of this straight curve and it's almost overnight.
Sure.
That has not been my experience. And I've worked with thousands of high performers. That hasn't been their experience either. It's a bumpy road. And so your mindset has to be that it's going to be a bumpy road, and it's not going to be overnight. I think most goals you want to achieve, anything worthwhile in life takes effort. Most of the goals we want to achieve takes more effort than what we think on the front end of it. And that's the drawback. People don't stay with it long enough. They don't continue it with it consistently enough to really live the life they're capable of living, to have the things whether it's material things or not, but the things they want to have in their life.
Sure. And as you just talked about, a lot of times the people that are most successful are the people that just don't quit.
Right.
And it's one of my themes is it's harder to beat a guy that just won't quit.
Yeah.
And that's me, and that's you. You picked yourself up off the mat, but you talked about the influences of society, and social media to me is both the beginning and the end of just success for so many people because they're pursuing a ghost. They just look and I got to have that today. Tomorrow they're pursuing something else. For something that I think what you've taught me is you got to stay the path. It's like playing golf. You got to swing the club the same way, and you got to swing it many, many times. And what do you think is the thing that just takes people off? Beyond just the pursuing what they see on social media, what takes people off path the most, and just your experience that just don't get it?
I think it has to do with the way we're wired, right? It takes sacrifice to be great. And I don't think you sacrifice family or integrity or values or any of that, but you sacrifice your comfort. Because if you're going to do something you haven't done before, you're going to have to do things that you haven't done before, which are uncomfortable.
Right? Success isn't comfortable, right?
And it's that fact that we're wired for comfort. And we gravitate towards what's comfortable and what's familiar. That's not what's going to create the next level for you. And so what happens for people is they start on this path and they bump up against the heavy lifting, if you will, the discomfort of doing different things, doing things differently. And they do it for a short period of time, and then they go back to what's comfortable, what's familiar. I mean, I can give you businesses that gone out of business, paragons in the industry, because of that same thing. Right. They had the formula, marketplace changed, they never changed. Why? Because they kept doing what was comfortable and familiar. And if we're going to grow, you're going to have to get uncomfortable.
Well, I always like to use a phrase it's uncomfortable to say, is either change or get comfortable with your current situation, whether that's your paycheck, your relationship status, anything. I mean, it's pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. I mean, I always like to look at who's somebody that's highly successful, that's a public figure, and just name one. I mean, are they comfortable? Probably not. And I still think that's one of the things that I see. And I think back to our time when we met in Chicago. What a unique group that is. And I don't know if you know, that group, we still, once in a while, we talk. Yeah. And like Dr. Swift out of Pennsylvania, if you look at him compared to me, he's in a university learning setting.
Yeah.
And I'm an entrepreneur, a business person, et cetera. Very different verticals, yet your principles and what you're just chatting about there are so real. Why do you think it is that way? I mean, why do some people can see that and others struggle with seeing that? Why do you think that happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a part of that, though, is really, do you believe in yourself? Most of life is between the ears.
Right.
And so your mindset, what do you read and what do you feed in your mind? Where's your faith in all of that? I'm faith led. So that makes a big difference for me. But it dictates what I put in my mind, what I dwell on, what I think about, what I read. And so I think left on your own, right? It's like a field, a farmer's field. He leaves that field alone. There isn't a great bumper crop that grows. It's a bunch of weeds. It's the same with your mind. Unless you're cultivating what you're reading, what you're thinking, how you're thinking, and intentionally building a more productive mindset, then guess what? It's probably not productive.
Sure.
And so, the other point of that is everything in the universe is expanding or contracting.
Right.
And we are too.
Right.
So if you're not intentional about growing, expanding, guess what's happening? Now, it doesn't feel like it in the moment, but when you look up 3 years from now, you're not going to be where you were. You're going to be further behind.
Right.
And so it's really, to me, Patrick, it's all mindset.
It's the 6 inches between your ears. I mean, my dad, who this whole podcast is named after, he would always tell me that when I was growing up. And then ironically, why I knew that my wife was going to be the one, as I met her dad, a prominent Minnesota high school hockey coach. And one night, one of the first nights, my wife's probably laughed and listened to this thing as I'm telling this story. And we're sitting downstairs at the first time I ever met him. And he's talking about just hockey. And I was a player growing up. And he says, I said, what makes you successful? And this, that. And then he says, it's those 6 inches between your ears.
Yeah.
As I spent just as much time coaching the kids about their mindset as I did working out in the gym or skating or anything else like that. It's coaching the mind. And to me, that's is a skill that there's a lot of people, me included, spend a ton of time exercising. You do the same, keeping in shape, doing the things that take care of yourself, especially after your cancer scare. Do you think people spend enough time these days? And it's probably an obvious answer, investing in their mind.
They don't. You look at it, average person watches 4 hours of TV a day.
Sure.
That is trash.
Mm-hmm.
That's trash. Maybe an hour, but anything more than that, trash. All the social media, most of the stuff online is trash. It's not helping you build a better life. It's entertainment. It's escapism. It's a way that I can avoid doing what I want to do to have the life I want to live, and I still pretend that I'm going to live that life.
Sure.
That's the key, right? It's when you start to confront the fact that, look, to live the life I want to live, I've got to do certain things. That's when life changes.
Sure. So then I got to ask, you're talking about the television world, and we're going to go completely off script here for a second, but what does a guy like Brian Moran, who's written #1 best-selling books, what's your TV fix?
Yeah. I don't watch a lot. I don't watch any of those. The one series I watch is Only Murders in the Building.
Okay.
It's fun.
I don't know if that's a good idea.
I don't know about that one or not, but it's a fun show. Other than that, I watch a little bit of sports.
Yeah.
I watch very little news because it's all negative. It's all political. It's all crap. So I try not to spend a lot of time with TV.
Yeah. You and I, again, I probably never had asked you that before, but we're very similar because I'll be outside. I'm somebody who will take a walk at 9:30 at night just to enjoy the fresh air and clear my mind and spend that. Probably like all of us at Kryptonite, you probably spend a little bit too much time trying to see what's going on in the world. And it's one of the changes I've made. I'm in the middle of this, what I call the hard 75 hard. And that's for me as a challenge of 75 days of a strict diet, no alcohol, 2 workouts a day, a gallon of water, read 10 minutes, all the different things. One of the things I said to me is I don't go to bed with my phone. I leave it in the other room because I mean, we have blue light here. I don't know. That's probably the most blue light I've seen in a little while. But what do you tell somebody, Brian, just as you go back to some of the principles that you built your whole business on, just those core actions that you need to do every day? What are some of the things you think that people should be doing and what they shouldn't? They need the 86 and get rid of out of their life. What would be a couple of those?
Well, one is make sure you have a compelling vision of what you want your life to look like. Because if you don't know that, it really doesn't matter what you do because you're not building life intentionally. And then just make choices. But it's not about being perfect.
Sure.
You know, we talk about the 12-week year is a guilt-free zone, right? I can't change yesterday,
right?
But I can learn from it. So I'm not worried about being perfect. I need downtime. You need downtime. It's not that TV's bad. It's like anything too much of it, though, is not helpful. And so am I setting up routines in my life? You know, I think there's this big misunderstanding between habits and routines. People say if you do it for long enough, it becomes a habit. That's only true if it doesn't take a lot of effort. If it takes a lot of effort, it never becomes a habit. It's a routine.
Sure.
I've worked out my whole life. People would say, oh, you have a habit. No, I still have to decide to work out. That's not a habit. That's a routine. And so building effective routines, especially morning routines, evening routines, how you start the day, how you end the day, makes a big, big difference. And that's one of the things I teach my kids is how to have productive routines in the morning, especially at the end of the day, those 2 times. But based on what I want in life.
Yeah, you just chatted about routines and making the choices. I've always talked and said success is really defined and broken down to your whole path in life comes down to about 2 minutes because you're faced with decisions that you got to make. And if you don't make the right decisions, you end up on the wrong path, but you make that choice. And one of the things I come back to why I was drawn to you and your system of just holding yourself accountable is those decisions. But one of the other things I'd like you to talk a little bit more about is you talk about perfection, because you actually, one of the things I took out of you is that, listen, if you're doing 85%, you're actually probably where you should be. Because if you're at 100%, you have no flexibility.
Yeah.
And I'll just say it, if you're always at 100%, you don't got enough shit going on. I mean, that's the truth.
Right.
I mean,
you're not stretching enough.
No, you're not pushing yourself.
I agree with that. I agree. It's not about being, and so when we look at that, it's really about understanding too the difference between outcomes and actions and what I can control.
Right.
I have no control of the outcomes. I control the actions. So as an outcome, I want to lose 15 pounds. That's an outcome. I don't control that. What I control are the actions, how I eat, how I exercise, that type of stuff. I want to add another million in sales. I don't control that. What I control is, are we doing the calls? Are we doing the marketing? Are we right? And are we monitoring it? So one is understanding what you can control and then focused on that. Do I have a set of actions that I'm confident if done consistently, I'll hit the goal? Not perfectly. I don't need to be perfect. There was one perfect guy 2,000 years ago. The rest of us are flawed. You're not going to be perfect. So, but am I consistent with the actions that are really going to drive the outcomes I want in my life? Whether that's a better marriage, whether that's better health, whether that's more income and a better, more thriving business, whatever it is, right? There's a set of actions that the universe requires. You don't get to define it. If I got to define what it takes, it'd be one action, it'd be drink beer, right?
If I can't do that for about another 60 some days. So
for every goal. But the universe tells you it's these actions. And so as you've got to be willing to pay the price of that. And that's where that whole discomfort thing comes in as well.
Yeah, success isn't comfortable, and find someone that is, and you're going to find someone that's willing to push themselves. I always say there's a box. And the box is filled with rules and norms, and the most successful people are outside the box. They think outside the box. They push themselves, yet they do it ethically. And the ethics is there. And that's, again, a guy like you, just the fact that you're sitting on here spilling your story. I mean, that's why our stories are similar, is that we went through that 2009 situation with health disaster, wrong industry, and then it changed everything. But it's being able to pick yourself back up and do that. And it kind of leads me to my next question. It was when that defining moment just came around, and it just creating meaningful interactions, just stuff that's going to leave a legacy in someone's mind, whether it's for an hour, 5 minutes, or their lifetime. When you look at just what you do, is there ultimately a defining moment that you say, okay, I've made it. I've gotten to where I want to. But now, I mean, this is me from the outsider. The 12-week year was your staple, but then you came out with Uncommon Accountability. Was that what pushed that? What brought that to life? What made you say, hey, I'm going to write another one and move away?
Yeah. So there's a couple chapters in 12-week year on accountability. And Michael, my business partner, and I have a very different view of that from the rest of the world. And it's a very empowering view, but we believe it's the accurate view of accountability. And so people would read those two chapters and ask for more. And so when our publisher came and said, hey, we need another book, we said, hey, we've got more to say on this topic. And it's such an important topic, because I think if you really understand what accountability is, Patrick, I think it's the most empowering concept you have to live your best life. And yet most people misunderstood the concept. And so that's why we came out with that book.
What do you think they misunderstand?
Well, think about how we experience accountability and how it's spoken about. It's synonymous with negative consequences.
Sure.
Like you go home tonight, you turn the news on, they're going to talk about somebody who did something they're not supposed to do, and someone in authority is going to hold them accountable, and they're going to punish them. Mm-hmm. That's the way we experience accountability. That's the way we think about it. Yet I think for most people, there's also this disconnect that deep down inside, that to be successful, I got to be accountable. So where do those two meet, and what's right and what's wrong? And so the fact of the matter is accountability isn't consequences, it's ownership. And it's based on free will choice. The fact that we always, always, always have choice.
Sure.
Now, we might not like the choices we have, but we have choices. And it's really recognizing that and taking ownership of those choices that changes everything. And how you think about accountability affects everything in your life, from your health to your relationships, your income. If you're a leader, how you interact with your team, what the team's capable of doing. It's amazing. When you shift away from accountability as consequences, accountability as ownership, it is literally a game changer.
Well, one thing that I get real. I mean, it's something that if you're not where you are you being real with yourself? Because there's sometimes, I mean, this is the thing that I'm sure you've run into, is people are using the 12-week year. They bring out their weekly score, and they're telling you they're at 90%, and you and I both know that's BS, because again, it comes back to the actions and outcomes. And that's something that I still today, just even myself, you have to be real. If you truly want to get to where you want to go,
right,
and just define who you are, is being real with it starts with being real with yourself. Too often, I think leaders make the mistake because I got to be real with my employees. Brian, I got to be real with you. Let's sit down and talk about where you're at. But what they miss is not being real with themselves to say that I help Brian get to where I go. Which kind of leads me to my thought process is just being leaders. I mean, one of the things I ultimately see is that people win or succeed because of their attitude. Just they say 54% of the time someone fails at a job is because their attitude. And where I always, and what drew me to the 12-week year and you was the fact that time, it's where you spend your time and how you manage it and being real with it. What advice would you give somebody when it comes down to just being honest with themselves, to prioritizing their life, taking the different things that come up every day and how to prioritize them? I mean, how do you do it? Because you're a busy guy. I mean, you got a lot going on.
Well, it's back to, if you look at the 12-week year, there's a set of fundamentals that drive high performance. So it starts with being clear on that vision, because if you're not clear on that, then everything's a priority.
Sure.
But different tasks have different values. And so once we understand what we really want, then you have a methodology now and parameters to sort what's most effective, what's not. But what happens for most people is they take the day as it comes and they're exhausted. They're like the hamster on the wheel, and they go home and they haven't moved the needle in any area. And it starts with they're not clear on what they want in order to align the actions. So I need to know what to say no to as much as I need to know what to say yes to.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to know both of those. I need to be clear on both of those. And so that starts with the vision, flows through to the plan as you set a goal, building out what we call the critical few, the least actions to accomplish that goal. So we're sorting out the actions. They're not all the same.
Right.
There may be a couple different dozen things I could do. What are the 3 or 4 or 5 that are really going to drive that?
You got to do these every day. It's a company I'm working with right now, helping them. And
right.
They're a recruiting firm, great people. But ultimately it came down to, and as I said, I tagged you in a post the other day about the 12-week year, because I said, we need a plan. We need to set you on a plan to get your business on track. And ultimately is, what are the few things that you have to do?
Right.
I mean, this is, to me, there's always projects. We always have, and as you talked about, you got metrics, you got numbers we're trying to hit, but the reality is there's some core actions. And too often I see is people are just, they got their task list begging at them and they're looking at it.
Yeah.
The things that's going to...
Yeah, that's a to-do list. Very different, though, than a real plan.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it all comes down, as we talked about, though, execution, right? You can know it's not enough. Mm-hmm. Every organization we've been in, every individual we worked with, they know all kinds of stuff. They've got great ideas. They've got great strategies. They've got great resources. That's rarely the gap. The gap is closing the knowing doing. I mean, if people just did more of what they know, Patrick, they'd be healthier, they'd have better relationships, they make a lot more money. But they're chasing new ideas. Why? Because that's easy, that's fun. Right? The heavy lifting is executing the stuff I need to do to be where I want to be 12 weeks from now, 12 months from now, 12 years from now.
Sure.
And being consistent with it.
I mean, I remember doing a speech not too long ago where I got up and there was a bunch of salespeople, a couple hundred in a room, and I got up and I said to them, how many are here today looking for a new trick? The new trick to make more sales. How many? I want it honest. I want you to be real.
Yeah.
Show me your hands. And the whole room raised their hand. And I said, okay, here's the problem. Most of you should probably just get up and leave now. Because actually what I'm going to do is go back and hone in on the skills that are absolutely critical to what we do. Listening, which most salespeople don't do. You and I have had a few good laughs about some of that stuff, to just being able to communicate, closing.
Right.
But where I see is still, as you talked about knowledge, I had use this, are you up to the task? Time management, attitude, skills, and knowledge. So many people spend this time trying to learn their job when their job is not being done in the first place. They spend all this time gathering knowledge, but they don't spend time getting... Yeah, I always like to say is GSD, get shit done.
Yeah.
I mean, I see too often that people just...
Yeah, you're building all this potential. You're not actualizing any of it.
They get all excited.
I read a book a week. Okay, what do you do with it?
Exactly.
What do you do with it? Where is that showing up in your life from an action standpoint? What fruit is it bearing? And if not, then stop doing it.
Well, and this comes back to, Break Time You, why it's important to me, and someone like you can impact their life as a short segment each time that they can digest in their day and actually go deploy it.
Right. Go take some action on that. You don't need a whole big concept. Just pick one thing and go after it.
And I always, if you do a couple things for 30 straight days, imagine where your life can be. And as I just said, we're not going to try to fix everything.
Right.
But I come back to why the 12-week year and what you've done and why it came back to me and sticks is there's a couple core actions they have to do. And if you do those, imagine where you'll be in 12 weeks. And it's such a powerful piece.
And you do that in a couple different areas of your life, right?
Yeah.
This notion of life balance is a misnomer. It leads you to believe that you're going to spend equal time in all these areas, which even if you could, isn't going to create what you want. What we talk about, Patrick, is intentional imbalance.
Sure.
And so being able to advance my career and advance, my personal life at the same time. But that's about focus and consistency. I can't be all over the board and do that. Otherwise, all it does is I become more diffused and more overwhelmed.
And that's, it's kind of where, there's going to be wins and losses in life. I mean, let's face it, we have things that we win at. And I think part of the success is, those of you that, if you haven't spent the time to know who Brian is, take the time to read his whole story. I mean, the fact is a guy, he just told you a part of it. You can read the whole thing, but what's beauty of it is that you picked yourself up and you didn't let the world kick your ass. You kicked it back. You did that. So, but what motivates
it tumbled me around a bit.
It did. And the school of hard knocks. I mean, you're well educated, but you also went to the school of hard knocks. I went there. I mean, a few things, but the beauty of it is what motivates you? I mean, beyond just, hey, I'm having success, and you talked about whether it's financial success, better marriage. What motivates Brian? What's just picks you up every day and says, I'm going to go?
Patrick, it's interesting because I think back to when I was a kid, I had a paper route.
Okay.
Now the millennials don't even know what that is.
I had one too.
Back in the day, they printed the news on big sheets of paper, they folded it up, and we delivered to your doorstep. It was kind of cool. But I had this paper route and I started timing myself just because it made it more interesting, and I tried to beat my best time. And then that mindset sort of carried over into sports and then into school and then into business. And I don't, a part of that was, I think I got some of that from my dad. My dad was always like, if you're going to do something, do it your best or don't do it. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of that. And it's just kind of hardwired into me that I'm always looking to get, if it matters to me, I'm looking to get better. Like I started shooting skeet recently.
Okay.
My daughter got on the trap team. She's not enamored with it. I'm hooked. So I'm shooting skeet. I've got a coach who's really good. I'm getting better every time I go out. I want to get where I shoot perfect rounds because that's possible, right? And so it's kind of that mindset. If I'm going to do it and it matters to me, let's do it well. There's other things I do that don't matter. So, like I golf occasionally. I'm not worried about being a scratch golfer. That's not my thing. If I golf, it's just to go have some fun.
Sure.
But with other areas that I want to perform in, I'm looking for ways to get better. I'm looking to apply what I'm learning. I'm measuring my performance, right? I'm figuring out what's working, what's not working. Same thing I apply to my business.
You keep score, which I remember my mother, when I grew up, God bless her, she'd say, we're not keeping score here. And then I think why the hell would she say that? And then in our marriage, you probably went through that as, what are we keeping score here? And the more sometimes there's picking, when do you keep score and not?
Yeah. Relationship scoring is not good. It's not
No.
But in a lot of other areas it is because it's feedback, right? And there's, again, between the years, there's so much head trash about measurement when it's just feedback. And some of it looks really good, some of it doesn't. That's what makes it difficult, right? But to your point, being honest, you have to have the courage to look at it and know in the moment, okay, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Because that's some insight into the action I'm taking. I either need to take more of this or less of that, or that's how you figure out what's working, what's not working.
I mean, it's something that why I keep score is in you looking at your metrics. I mean, what are the trends of my business, my life? Which way am I going? Up, down, anywhere in between? Because let's face it. I mean, if you're not measuring and having something to measure, how do you even know where the heck you're going? And I struggle with, when you do need to keep score in certain aspects of your life. But as you said, Judy and Leah don't want us keeping scores with certain things there. I mean, we're both blessed.
I don't think I want her scoring me either, because that would always work in her favor, not mine.
So, I mean, just a little off script here. I mean, what would Judy say defines you?
A big piece of it is family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a big piece of it. I was blessed to grow up in a great family where the family was a priority. And so we've been very intentional about our family identity. What's it mean to be a Moran? What do we stand for? What are we about? We're all about family memories. I mean, I'll tell the story about a cottage we have in Michigan that was all for family memories. And so a big piece of it is family for sure.
Yeah, and we've spent that time, the Rombauer and everything else, but my wife's first thing she saw you today talked about, because she's such you guys are a real good balance. I mean, high energy, positive. She loves you. You can see that the minute that I met her, and it's mutual going back. And it's something I really admire about you is it seems that she's part of the staple in helping you keep going as well. I mean, you guys stuck together, picked it up, and look where you came. I mean, look where you came from, that infamous monkey night, to where you are now. Yeah. I mean, what a journey that's been. And it's great to see that she, has just, she's your biggest fan. I mean, and that's mine. And I think it's a great thing. If there's one thing you could tell your past self that, when you're starting, if you had to start it all over, well before even you got to become the author that you are, and the success story and the consultant and everything else, we have a lot of people are going to listen to this that are earlier in their career. Yeah. Maybe just even start now. Maybe they're even in college. Maybe they're in high school. What would you tell those folks?
There'd be two things, Patrick. One would be, don't give a rip about what other people think, because that'll limit what you do and what you take on, right?
Sure.
Don't, you're not living for other people. And there will always be people that will discourage you. Stay away from those folks. The second thing would be, find a mentor. Find anyone who's ahead of you and learn from them, because it's going to shorten your curve.
It's a great advice. You're somebody that's taken a lot of people underneath their wing. What should someone that's looking for a mentor look characteristic wise? Maybe something that's a couple of things, 2-3 things that are critical for someone to go look at.
Yeah, good question. I always look at character first. And it's the same thing with the people we hire. We hire mainly on character, less on skill set, because we can train skill set. And so if I'm looking for a mentor, I'm looking for character, and I'm looking for a track record of success.
Okay.
But it's an ethical track record. It's the character along with it. They don't have all these burned relationships and all this carnage in the wake.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, and that's just something that's critical is, I mean, I always, you talked a few times about the social media world, and one thing that I've learned a lot, especially in the last couple of months, is I've consulted for this one business. And it's kind of live versus Memorex, real versus fake, just resumes and just the different piece. Anything that you would suggest to that person starting out to do the due diligence? How do they do it? I mean, let's face it, you and I, we know how to do it, but they may not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you start to ask, and you look for clues, right? What's the person's background? What's their track record? What are other people saying about him? Successful people, there's always going to be people that poo-poo successful people. But talk to the people you know and you trust about how they've experienced the person. Who's worked with this guy before? Who's had interactions with him or her? And how have they acted in those? It's like business partners, right? Mm-hmm. Really important who you select as a business partner. And the key thing there is that you have the same values. I'm blessed with my business partners. We have the same values, and I have multiple businesses, but we have the same values. So I know we walk that out, and when there's conflict, because there's going to be conflict,
right?
That we're going to fight fairly. And in the end, right, we're going to come to a conclusion that works for all of us. It's not his needs over mine or mine over hers, but we're all looking out for one another.
I listened, Brian, to a podcast recently with one of your cohorts in the Break Time U business that we're working on is David Noor, and they interviewed him, and they were chatting about different things and what's one of the lost arts. And you just talked about a conflict resolution. And I can look at times, again, defining my own self in my business career successes and not is just conflict resolution. What's something you're going to give? We've kind of talked about the people that either A, starting out, or B, trying to reboot their career. Let's face it, the economy is going to take a toll on some people. What's a few lessons you can teach them that you would recommend that they learn in order to resolve conflict a little bit better? Because it is part of it's part of life.
It's part of life. So the better you get at that, the more successful you're going to be. And so one of the keys is don't put it off. There's a tendency to think conflict's always going to be emotional. Again, between your ears, how you think about it. If you think about it as just getting to the truth, then confront it early because there's less emotions. The sooner you confront it, the less emotional it is. The longer you let it fester, the more emotions there are for you and for the other person. And the second thing is just speak the truth and recognize that you have your version of the truth, they have theirs. And so it's really about getting that out on the table and then finding some middle ground.
Sure. And finding that middle ground, I mean, it comes down to, I always talk about listening are you listening or are you just waiting to talk?
Right.
And I feel that that's actually one of the skills that gets most people in trouble is they don't listen. As we get closer to wrapping up today, you've had a lot of success coaching people, and you just gave some examples there of some people, some skills to improve on, shifting mindset, taking action. You probably had some people that they failed. How did you feel about that? How did that impact you? And what was your takeaway, and what did you learn from it and apply to ultimately make yourself better and your business better?
Well, I think failure is part of life, like we talked about. And so I don't expect the people we work with to always be successful. And that's why staying in it really matters. And so when we've had clients that we haven't gotten the results we want, or they haven't gotten the results they want, part of that accountability is us taking ownership of that. We can't change that right now, but in that situation, again, what would we do different? And how would that change the outcome? So to me, the failures are learning opportunities. And that's probably where we make the most advancements in our business anyways, is when we do fail, when it doesn't work the way we thought, because now we're challenged to figure out, okay, what happened there? What would we do different? And then when we do that, how does that change everything?
Sure.
The successes are great. I love them. They're fun. Not as much learning in that.
Sure.
A ton of learning in a failure, as long as your mindset is that it's not a failure, right? Vince Lombardi, it's not whether or not you get knocked down, it's whether or not you get up again.
Exactly.
And so if you get up again, then it's a learning moment. If you stay down, it's a failure.
Sure.
So I don't think about them as failures. I think about them as learning opportunities and learning moments. As difficult as they are, and I don't, it's not like I look for them and I hope for them and I pray for them, but when they do show up, we try and take the mindset of, okay, what can we learn from this? How do we get better? Because that's the stuff that makes us. One of my most difficult clients has become a really dear friend of mine. And why? Because he made us better.
Sure. Another author I like to follow is David Goggins, and a lot of people have heard of him in different things, and he talks about it's like a live autopsy.
Yeah.
It's taking a whole situation, carving it open, and it's all there. Let it spill out. I mean, sometimes I think people get afraid of the facts. That to face someone actually is...
Well, I think what happens, Patrick, is they attach blame to it.
Sure.
So if you don't attach blame to it and shame to it, then it's their situations, their facts, it's information. The minute you start to attach blame or shame to it, then no one's going to want to look at it.
Yeah. It just lay it out and let's fix this so we can move on and get back to what the mission is. Because I ultimately, one of the is the more, when you think about, again, going back to the 12-week year, the more you're in conflict, you don't resolve it, the more you're not working on what's actually going to make you successful. And it's kind of, I always should chat about the 12-week years. It's my playbook. It's this, I mean, we think about some of the best coaches that are out there, and they've got that play card right there, and they're flipping through based upon tendencies, trends, and different pieces, and they act. Well, not dealing with that just takes you off plan, and all of a sudden you're running the wrong plays. Everybody's running the wrong plays, and it's getting back on track, and it's sticking to the core actions that, as you say, the actions versus the outputs. You'll get the outputs back on track. So that's just something that when you think about these different things, it's just critical as to what we do. Last question, and then I have a few more things just off script that I just got to ask.
So it's not the last question.
It's not the last question.
It's the last official question.
It's the last official question. Is okay. We all have aha moments that they just bring out awareness of your leadership. And when it comes to holding people accountable, I mean, this is something in your uncommon accountability. What do you think those pivotal moments were for you that ultimately you've chatted about the personal stuff, but were there other times as you were writing, building your business, that you actually said, this really changed me and really defined and brought us to another level?
There were a couple, Patrick. One was the realization, the insight that it wasn't about ideas, it wasn't about strategies, it was about execution. And that's true in life.
Mm-hmm.
The other was this aha around accountability, because I had experienced like everybody else, and I hated it when someone tried to hold me accountable, right? We're less opposed to anything we help create. And that whole notion of holding your team accountable honestly inhibits the team. We talk about hold them capable. That sounds like semantics, but it's subtly but profoundly different in that when we hold people capable, we confront them with the choices they have and the natural consequences, as opposed to just coming and confronting with choice. And I think that I got there because I didn't like it when I had a leader that did that with me, that held me accountable. It didn't motivate me. It pissed me off. And I wanted nothing to do with them. I didn't want to perform for them. It actually made me want to not perform, right? Versus perform.
Sure.
And so, kind of digging into that, what was going on for me, talking to other people, they were feeling the same. And I realized that, that's not accountability. That's consequences. And consequences can shape behavior, but you never get discretionary effort with negative consequences. You get just enough to stop the consequences, and it comes with all this collateral damage.
Sure.
Right? The avoidance, the sabotage, whatever it is. And so I saw that in myself. I saw that in other people, and so started to think about, back to, but wait a minute, I know you got to be accountable to be successful. And so that was really the big aha, was really kind of redefining or accurately defining what accountability is and what it's not. It's not consequences. It's ownership based on free will choice. And when you take ownership of the areas that matter in your life, things change. Doesn't guarantee you're going to get the outcomes you want, but it guarantees you're going to bring the best you have at creating those outcomes. And it's in your marriage, it's in your relationships with your kids, it's in every area of your life, right? You're either at one level you're a victim, right? And in your mindset, it just happened to you, or you're accountable, which means you played a role in it. There's no blame affixed to that. That's the other thing. People say, well, you need to be accountable. It's like the buck stops. There's a lot of blame with that. There's no blame affixed to that. It's just looking at what role did I play in it? And had I performed differently, the outcome would have been different. That's the possibility there.
Amazing. So Brian, is part of my podcast, and let this define you, I want to wrap up each segment with a less than a minute segment from me, and then a less than a minute segment from my guest. So I actually go first because I knew I was going to ask you that. And when I'm done, I'm going to ask you to close it out with just a minute or less. Kind of goes into that Break Time University short, simple message that if you said, listen, this is one thing that I want someone to take away from today and from Brian Moran, this is what it be. So I'm going to start out just in a minute or less. He just used a term that really stuck out with me, is holding people capable, not accountable. And when I think about what you just said right there, there's so many wide-ranging things, but you see as a leader, the capacity for them to do it. It's your job to bring that out in them. And when I look at let this define you as a leader, is my role is to bring the absolute best and make them be the very best version of themselves every single day, and holding them capable to what they do. So I call it the break time minutes. It's literally a minute. I would tell everybody that's watching this, if you watch nothing else, I took that away today, and that was amazing. So I thank you for that lesson. So now you're on the spot. Right. The question you weren't prepared for, but watch the master, one of the best people I've ever met in my life, answer that question.
Well, by the way, that hold them capable stuff works with your kids too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole nother level there. But I'll stay on the same topic, which is this notion of accountability as ownership, because I think it is a game changer. When you understand that and you take ownership for the areas of your life, your health, your relationships, your income, how you spend your money, right? How you contribute to the world, what legacy you're going to live, the things that matter to you. When you take ownership of that, that's when you have your best chance of living your best life. And there's no blame affixed to that. You're not going to be perfect, but stay focused on what it is in the future you want to create and own that. All the way down to the daily actions. I can't just own the vision. I've got to own the daily actions, the heavy lifting, if you will. And when you take ownership of that, what you're going to find is you're going to accomplish way more than you ever thought possible in less time than you can imagine.
It's so profound, and it's just the way I think as leaders, it's our role, like you just said there, to bring out the absolute best and help people accomplish more than they ever thought possible. So Brian, hey, we did it, team. It was great. Thank you for coming in. It's a pleasure. Chicago to here. What a great trip. I look forward to seeing you some more on this, and we're going to do some more stuff with BTU, awesome. And it's an absolute honor.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Did you enjoy this conversation? Hit the plus sign or follow button so you don't miss an episode with Patrick and his inspiring guests. Thank you for joining us, and remember to let this define you.